Greetings and welcome to another edition of Montpelier Connection. I'm State Representative Mike Mrowicki from the Wyndham 4 District of Putney and Dummerston. And here we are getting ready for the 2025 session. The election is behind us and we're preparing to get to work and hit the ground running, as they say. Today's guest is one of your two state senators in Windham County, Senator Wendy Harrison of Brattleboro. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, Mike.
Well, thanks. You just finished your first session as a legislator. Any thoughts as you look back?
Yes. I learned a lot. Things come fast and furious, as you know. And the first year was especially impactful. I learned just to get going and don't stop.
Yeah.
So it was terrific, and I'm looking very much forward to this session because I'll know more about how things work.
Well, I really appreciate working with you. I feel like we have a really coherent county delegation here. We work well together, and I'm looking forward as we go to the next session to working, continuing our work together. There's a lot for us to do, and as you said, it comes fast. We try and compress 52 weeks of work into 18 weeks. So it gets to be, I think somebody once described it as drinking from a fire hose. So we try and do our best. The election certainly showed some directions for us. I think there was, as we look back at the last session, we accomplished some significant things. I think our child care bill is now being looked at as other states as an example of how you can really change the landscape and complete some work to improve how things are done, how they're paid for, who's eligible. And it's such an important part of workforce to keep parents in the workforce, as well as providing that start for children with trained quality early educators. Have you been hearing from people about the child care bill?
I have, and that was a really good bill for me to learn on. It was in my committee in economic development because of the economic development impacts. And we heard from employers because, as you know, the funding for that is a tax on payroll. It's a payroll tax, so it's not a property tax. It's a payroll tax. And 3/4 of that tax is paid for by the employer. And we had employers coming to us saying, please tax us for this purpose, because we're losing money because we don't have employees, right, to work. And one employer had calculated that he would make up the tax within 3 work days every month. So the benefit to the employers is significant. The benefit to families is huge. The benefit to the children is huge. And what I really liked about that bill was that it increases the pay to the child care workers, and it also increases the level of income for folks to be eligible, for families to be eligible. Yeah. So it really was very holistic. It took 10 years to get that finished. And yes, I have been hearing, and as you and I were talking, it's so important to look at what we did before we do more. Yeah. I served on the Government Accountability Committee, and what that committee suggested to both houses is that, both chambers, I should say, is that we look at what we did before we start to make changes to those systems. Yeah. And everything I hear about the impact of the child care bill is just terrific.
Yeah. We've been hearing from workers too.
Yes.
Where many of them got improved salaries to where they can now make more. We heard actually people were leaving the field because they could go work at a fast food restaurant and make more. The other thing, they're getting help with student debt, with their training costs. Right. So it really is a win-win-win for everybody here. So I'm glad we did that. As we go higher on the ladder of education, though, we certainly heard a lot about education funding and property taxes this year. And I think we're all waiting to hear the kind of proposals the governor lays out. I think we're we're clear we want to work together with the governor. So we're eagerly awaiting the plans that he puts on the table for us. A week or so ago, the National Education Association of Vermont put out a proposal, which I think had some real merit to it. You know, they looked to use income more than property tax, with the supposition that income is a better barometer of wealth than just property. And I think we're seeing that. And I know in Putney we saw lots of people, because of a reappraisal, saw their property values, but also their taxes. And I'm especially concerned how that affects retirees on fixed income, people on disability with fixed income. I think we've got a lot of work to do to make sure there's more of a correlation between people's ability to pay and what their taxes actually are. Have you been hearing from people on this regard too?
Oh, sure. The property tax increases last year, especially for certain communities, were just not sustainable, and it was a perfect storm of multiple factors. But that has to be our first priority this year is protecting public education, because it's very, very important to have a solid public education system. I mean, that's the basis of democracy. So we need to protect public education while we find funding sources. And we're such a small state. It's really difficult. And in the Senate, our pro tem has said that he will be having each of the money committees set aside the first week to hear from the governor's folks and about what they are proposing, because we do have to work with the governor, and so we're giving them the first shot.
Yep. Looking forward to hearing his leadership on this.
Yes.
Yeah, and working together. We know that there are other concerns that are contributing to that too, and I'd like to hear the governor's ideas around that, specifically health insurance costs. The cost of health insurance and what it covers are moving in different directions too, which is a big problem.
Right.
Access to care is a problem. People are calling up and finding wait times of months, up to a year, to get in to see somebody. And our system's got to start working better. We're hearing how hospitals are struggling to stay in business. There was just a report.
Oh, yes.
The Wyman report. I don't know if you have any
comments
on that, but we're certainly hearing from people. Did you want to weigh in on that?
Sure. I've been keeping tabs on that, read the report, and attending the meetings. We have two hospitals in our district, Brattleboro Memorial and Grace Cottage. And they're both excellent facilities. They actually work together well, and they each had already implemented some of the recommendations. So, but there are some recommendations that would cause harm to those.
Yeah. And we've seen it happen as well in Bellows Falls.
Yes.
Where the urgent care center was closed down.
Yes.
So that means people in Bellows Falls are going to have to travel either to Brattleboro, Springfield, or Keene. So there's really not a local option there right now, and that I feel like that's not the way we want healthcare to be.
No.
Access is essential.
You're exactly right, and especially in Bellows Falls, where there are a lot of folks who don't have cars.
Yeah.
And that clinic, I have still some hope that something will happen there. But it's situated in just the perfect spot for people to walk.
Yeah.
And to take that away is terrible.
Yeah. And I think it illustrates one of the downsides of what's happening is that healthcare decisions are being made with finances as the primary piece. And I know I've heard from other people who've been denied by their insurance companies, or they've had to wait because a decision was made not by a physician or medical provider, but by an insurance company on what their care was going to be. And that's another piece of the system that I would say is not working.
Right. I agree with you. I had a bill last year to minimize Medicare Advantage because I learned a lot about the disadvantages of Medicare Advantage.
Yeah,
and
we're hearing stories that aren't good.
No, and that's something that I want to keep pushing.
There's a lot of promises made that don't seem to follow through.
Right, intentionally, and it's not good.
Yeah, so that's another piece of the education costs. As we look at the budgets, most of what's in the budget are contractual, and you can't cut that.
Right, they don't have the ability to cut it at the local level, but the state does have some agency in those contracts. So I think that's something
Speak to that a little bit more.
Well, we just need to look at how we do contract, and we need to make the most efficient contracts that we can. Yeah. It's hard in a small state, but we are a state, and in our geography, we do have some influence. So it's important that we're very particular and firm on getting the best product for our residents, whether it's the schools or the teachers or other instances.
Yeah, and be interested to see what the governor has in those plans too, because it's a huge factor in how costs went up last year, and while the projected increase this year is not as extreme as last year, it's 6%, which is still significant.
Right. And then there's costs to the towns, because that 6%, I don't believe includes town budgets.
That's true.
And town. So the state did have, a few years ago, I was a town manager in multiple places here, and the state did have a state contract. So it was a contract that the state put out, but municipalities could piggyback off of it for road salt, for example. Yeah. And so things like that, where there's no issue, it doesn't cost the state money to help out the towns in that way. And so if we can save by purchasing in bulk, which is not that complicated, we can, that helps. Every little bit helps.
Yeah. Well, it's been really helpful to our county contingent to have your experience with local government here. And as local governments have their challenges, are there things that you think we could be working on, and maybe from the perspective of being on what some places call local government committees, and used to be that in the House, but for instance, Government Operations Committee?
Yeah, since I have been in this field, I've transportation and GovOps have been the committees that I want to be in. I was on neither of them this past year, but it was good. Economic development, there was a lot that impacted local government. I was really happy to be there for the Act 250 and the Home Act, which is where we mandated certain things that local governments do. And I value local government in Vermont is so unique, and it's so special to the communities, and it's a treasure. Yeah. So I have heard, there are thoughts of not having, not continuing the amount of authority that local governments have in their own communities, and I support local governments. Yeah. Very much so. I really like what we did in housing, and it's showing progress. There was a nice article in Digger today.
Digger, especially the Virgins project.
The Virgins project, but there are a lot of projects happening in our area too, in Bellows Falls, Rockingham, and Brattleboro. Brattleboro has had the most permits issued for housing units this year than it has since 1989. Yeah. since 1989, the most permits. I mean, that's huge.
That is.
And those are not all of one type. It's market rate, it's affordable housing, it's small units, big units. It's
And the work we did, as this article in Vermont Digger articulates, that the bills we passed over the last 2 years really have opened up the permitting process so that developers feel like they can get into things without being burdened to the point that they might not even consider. And I know in Putney we've been working for 3 years now to get a small project with 25 residences, and because of the way the appeals process was, it allowed a couple of individuals to stop what would have been homes for 25 families. We just went through and got through the last hurdle. But I think what we're doing is lessening the abilities of people to appeal on really making the same case over and over again for 3 years.
Right.
And that the damage that's been done to Putney now is what I hear from builders and developers are they don't want to go near Putney because they're afraid they're going to get sued. Now that's not good for businesses. That's not good for homeowners, and I think we're looking at that as well. What Massachusetts does now is, if you're going to appeal something, you have to secure a bond that will cover court costs if you lose. For
yes, and we talked about that in the Economic Development Committee last year.
Yeah.
And something like that could work here. We did reduce the ease with which an appeal can be made. So we made some progress on that. Evidently, Vermont law requires that there be some appeal, which is interesting to me. I still want to push back on that, especially with municipal appeals, because municipalities go through a lot of effort to have a town plan, and then you have then you have zoning that is based on that town plan. Rigorous. Right, and then and all public. So the public knows, and it's over many years. And then when a development comes in, there's a development review board that also has public meetings. So there's many opportunities for people to have their say. And so if a project has gone through a town process, I really don't see
at multiple levels.
There needs to be a really good reason to have an appeal to that. That should be at a much higher threshold than it is.
And I think we're going to continue to look at what the threshold should be, and the laws we just passed lessen the circumstances where an Act 250 process.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I was integral in that actually in the interim.
Yeah.
And the purpose of the interims was twofold. It was to get housing going while we develop the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, because those maps will be controversial. It's not going to be an easy process. And it was also to just see what kind of an impact just the thought of Act 250 was having on development, and it was stopping people, whether or not the system was as scary as people thought it was, because in towns there's very similar requirements. But just Act 250 has a reputation. And it's terrific how well the interim exemptions are showing that you can develop in Vermont.
So should we take away the interim label there and make those permanent changes?
I would not do that. No, okay. Because the interim exemptions were designed to be temporary. And towns don't yet have all of the authority that Act 250 does have. So there are gaps there. And the interim exemptions are also only for a certain amount of units. I think they were exactly the right thing to do temporarily, but they were intended to be temporary, and in my opinion, they should stay temporary.
Well, I think we've convinced most people that there is a housing crisis here in Vermont. And across the country,
I think
really.
They knew, right, exactly. It's not just in Vermont.
Pushback that I hear, well, let the housing be somewhere else. Then I hear people calling me and say, well, I can't find anybody to shovel my snow or help stack the wood or plow. We can't get more people into the fire department. I can't get in for a dentist appointment.
Right.
We can't find enough staff at the school. And this is all connected to housing.
Housing and childcare.
Housing and
childcare are those were the number one and number two for barriers of just all sorts of institutions.
And as more and more Vermonters have hair the same color as mine, we're going to need an infusion of younger people, and then they're going to need to live somewhere. One of the focuses that we are looking at, though, is to create more senior housing.
Yes. For
people who have the house that they raised their family in, and now there's not, where there were 4 or 5 people, there's now only 1 or 2. That would open up, if they had somewhere to go, would open up that housing for new families to come in. So.
And there's, shared housing is good. And then just on my street, there was a house across the street that had a couple who had lived there for years and years, raised their family there. They moved to assisted housing, and another person bought it, and she has developed multiple units in the house, and it's still the character of the neighborhood is still lovely. It's not something that people should be afraid of, but it has provided more housing. Actually, nurses.
Well, there's a piece there, the nursing shortage. I think we need all of those things.
Yes.
Whether it's infill housing, adding the ADUs, the accessory dwelling units.
Yes.
We need all of that, and as we go along, we've got to make some progress, or Vermont is going to wither.
Right.
People will stop looking. Businesses, professionals, workers at every level are going to stop looking at Vermont as a place to go.
Yes, I think we're in really good shape in terms of the future. And actually, last year, Vermont had the highest amount of the highest ratio of people moving in versus people moving out. Which that's good. And people found us from the pandemic. We were seen as a very safe state. We're also seen as a more resilient state. Obviously, we have flooding and things like floodplain restoration needs to happen and more quickly.
That leads to the next topic that I wanted to touch before we have to go, and that's climate.
Yes.
We have done a number of things that I think can be helpful. I see right now New York State is going to be taking up a bill modeled after Vermont's Climate Action Fund, which is, the idea is that local taxpayers should not be paying for that damage, that the fossil fuel companies should be paying for the damage that we're seeing across the state and across the country. That's one bill that we passed. As we see the damage, though, across, one of the challenges I think we're going to be looking at is insurance.
Right.
The costs are going up, and I have a sister in Florida who says insurance companies are leaving Florida now, and they've just stopped writing policies. What do you think we can do about that?
Right. No, that's a big issue. We are a good place for insurance companies in terms of the captive insurance. That's a different category, but we do know how to regulate insurance so that it's beneficial to the insurance companies. We need to do more. And that's really a national issue. So that's something that, but we have to deal with it.
Getting back to climate. We have to work at every level. We've seen some of the good things that have happened in West Brattleboro, where we did the project to restore the wetlands, and it works.
Right.
What are the other kind of things that you think we could be doing locally? Transportation?
Well, we do have another one, another floodplain, and we had some meetings last summer, and where folks came and looked at the floodplain. So that they can do it also. Public transportation and transportation in general, transportation is a huge generator of greenhouse gases, it's also an expense. And if we can focus on methods that reduce the cost to Vermonters at the same time that they reduce emissions, that's where we need to go, in my opinion. We can't just look at things that help the environment, especially if there's a huge cost to Vermonters. And generally, the more efficient we are, the lower cost and the lower generation.
So weatherization for homes.
Weatherization is huge, and that's something that I've been when I was talking with folks about the clean heat, I was explaining that my understanding is that the intent was to reduce expenses for everyone, especially people who couldn't afford air source heat pumps, and the number one place to start is weatherization, because whatever fuel you're using, you don't want to waste it.
Keep it in the house.
Yeah, as my dad always said, we're not air conditioning the state.
And I agree. I think in the last election there was a lot of messaging that climate actions are going to cost people money, when the reality is clean energy is cheap energy. I know when we put a heat pump into our house, our housing costs went down by about 40%.
Yes, that's a great example.
I have an electric vehicle now, and I give the example that 2 years ago when I had a gas vehicle, in April of that year I spent $320 on gasoline. Last year I spent $90 on electricity, driving the same distances between Montpelier and Putney. So clean energy is cheaper.
Yes.
We have to help people avail themselves on it, and that's where I think we need to make sure that those options to subsidize, maintain, or increase. And the reality is clean energy is cheaper, despite some of the messaging you hear from the Fuel Oil Dealers Association.
Right. And then just having, this is where everything comes together when you look at where housing development and all development happens, and it's better when it's concentrated. So then people can walk, and then we also then talk to each other, because we need to also look at our just health as communities, because that's something that's being harmed generally, and something I really value about Vermont is that we do actually talk to each other.
We have community.
And you talk to each other more when you see each other.
And that's what the smart growth philosophy tries to encourage, to have the utilization of cluster development rather than sprawl.
Right.
Yeah. We only have a couple minutes left. Are there other things that you're thinking about for next year that we haven't mentioned yet?
We did talk about most of them. This might be a place to. You can just cut this little bit. But let me think of something, because I get what I try to. The way I try to frame how I look at proposals and issues is what's going to be best for my constituents, and obviously it's almost the entire county. So there's varieties. I mean, what's going to be best for Bellows Falls is different than Dover, and but we need to just keep the people in mind, keep the people engaged, and if folks do have concerns, let me and all of us know soon. It's very hard in the chaos, controlled chaos of the legislative.
So if people have ideas, this is a good time.
This is a good time.
And how would they best do that?
They can contact me by email. It's the same legislative email that everyone has, but it's wleg.state.vt.us. And I'll give you my phone number, which is 802-922-8519. And something I remind myself is that some of the best legislation has taken years to get through. The child care bill, for example, worked on that for 10 years. I'm relatively impatient. I don't want to wait 10 years for things to happen. But sometimes it does. But then it's typically a better product.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. And the arc of legislation can take long, and there are times we have to move fast, and we do.
Right, but we have to look long term.
But this is a good time if people have ideas or
Yes.
if they want to contact you. I would also add that during the session, you can also call the State House directly. The Sergeant at Arms number is 802-828-2228, and that's where you can leave messages for us. It get to us pretty quickly. Email is good, but if you don't do email, or if you want to leave a phone message, you can always leave it at the Sergeant at Arms desk, and they will get us messages. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This is fun.
I'm looking forward to the next session.
I am
think
too.
There's some exciting work. There's a lot of work to do, and looking forward to working with you and our whole county delegation.
Me too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to the people at BCTV and those of you who are watching. This is a good time to get in touch with us if you have ideas. So please do. Our legislative website has contact information for everybody, and our emails, as Wendy was saying, is on the legislative website as well. Until next time then, take care.